What's up, guys, for another video on my Hyperion review series. Just finished part 2 of Hyperion, and my overall thoughts so far is that it's getting really interesting, especially when it comes to the Shrike. Now I'm going to do something a little different. I know I set out a couple categories last episode about how to review, but when I was looking back on it, it was honestly kind of cringe, so I'm going to try to do it a different way. And I did a bunch of sticky notes, did a bunch of notes throughout the part 2, and to see if that will help me better in terms of remembering and talking more about what actually happened in the book. Anyways, the book starts off on page 100 to all the way to page 174, so you guys know. And so, first things first is that we are in a new perspective now. Colonel Kahmad Kasad? Kahmad Kasad. Yes, Kahmad Kasad, I think. He is sharing his story on why he is at Hyperion and why he decided to go on the pilgrimage with the rest of the group. Now, his story starts off very interesting. It starts off with him being in a simulation. And I honestly was kind of thrown off about this. I thought they were going to do some weird time travel type of thing where he was someone from a cajillion years ago and somehow survived throughout all time, but then it did a kind of like a reverse twist of where it wasn't actually set back in time. What actually happened was that he was in a simulation. He is a military man, and he was going through, during his schooling, simulations of trying to win battles, essentially, in different battles throughout history. Honestly, a really cool concept, and one that made the story very interesting as it kept going throughout. Now, before that stuff even happened, I want to say a couple things. One, I believe Martin Silenus and Lamia slept together before the Kasad story even started. I believe they slept together, and I believe Martin Silenus is getting information out of everybody. He seems very gun-ho about wanting people's information, and also the scholar as well, Sol Wentrobe. He's also very interested in hearing everybody else's story. I honestly think one of those two, I want to say the scholar, honestly, because he's more of the nice type, and so it'd be more of a twist if he was the actual imposter. Not imposter, but the agent in the group. So either one of them, I think, are the agent that the consul is looking for. Anyways, I believe Martin Silenus slept with Bron Lamia. I believe so. It was very heavily hinted, unless Silenus just heard Lamia having sex somewhere. But I think it was both of them. And make sure that my phone isn't too overheated. But I believe it was them. So it's very interesting hearing them go on and on, especially the scholar constantly asking, hey, who's the next story? What's the next story going to be? Blah, blah. Anyways, back to Kasad, because that is where the story really gets interesting. So like I said before, the reverse twist of Kasad being in a simulation, and through most of his military life, training during these simulations, a woman keeps just randomly popping into the simulation. How? I still don't know yet, but the woman and Kasad throughout these different simulations just kept sleeping together. It was honestly pretty sudden, and I didn't really know if I liked that too much. Honestly, a couple things I really didn't like about Kassad's story, especially the one I mentioned at the end, which is downright disgusting. But they kept sleeping together throughout their simulations. And so because of that, Kassad became infatuated with her and basically just wants to be with her. So, after we go through all that... Oh, and another thing is revealed. Kassad may not be Muslim, but he was at least raised Muslim. A couple times he mentioned that he was Muslim or knew the ways of Allah. During a military mission, he posed as someone who was knew of Allah and all that stuff. So interesting, a bit of character development, highlighting the fact that Kassad was a raised Muslim. And then we get to, I'm trying to think. Sorry guys. And then we get to not the current, but the almost current setting, where Kassad, after all of his military expeditions, is injured due to a random trap, and is sent into a ship where he's being healed. By the way, throughout this, they were talking about the Ouster invasion of a specific planet. The Ousters were really, were really explored more in the story, which I actually liked a lot. We learned a lot more about what the Ousters are doing, about how they are, about their cool societal thing of being, essentially not being a planet inhabiting group of humanity. Instead, they are always in these ships that are constantly going through space. And so knowing that because of that, their biology is slightly different. They're all a lot lankier, all a lot taller, and all have a lot less muscle. Even to the point where Kassad, who is a tall man himself, whenever he tries to take a suit of a woman ouster, even the woman ouster was taller than him. So it's very interesting how they portrayed the ousters here. Very cool. Kind of reminds me of the Eldar a little bit, into how they have the ship cities where they constantly live in. It's very interesting. But anyways, after he was injured, he was introduced to a ship, and it was mentioned a couple. Here it is. Here's a line. Since most of the physical repair would be done in Fuge anyway, it made some sense to let the old hospital ships work on the seriously wounded and the revivable dead. That's an interesting bit of world building. The medical sciences has gone to a point where they can somewhat revive dead people. That's honestly pretty freaking cool bit of information. Anyways, we go through an altercation where the Ousters commandeer the ship. Well, kind of commandeer the ship. They blow the ship up, and then a bunch of Ousters come in and try to take Kassad. Kassad gets all the way through it. Very cool having Kassad talk about the differences of the Ousters and the typical web world people, just through their suits, through their ship controls, through their language. It was very interesting hearing the differences between them through Kassad's perspective. And so we get to, just exploring what the Ousters are. Very interesting stuff. I honestly want to hear much more about what the Ousters are and what they're doing, and why they're always trying to mess with web world. I mean, it makes sense. They're not a planet-faring species. They don't live on planets. They don't habitate planets. They habitate in the ships above, which is very interesting in terms of world building for the Ousters. And so we get to the most interesting part of the story. Kassad eventually crashes his ship to Hyperion. And when he crashes his ship to Hyperion, he comes into contact with the woman that he has been sleeping with in his simulations. And this is where things start to get weird. Because the woman, her name is Moneta, or Monet, I honestly forgot the name, is what I assume to be, well, at first I thought she was just one of the Shrike, one of the people that follow the Shrike, that worship the Shrike cultists. And so I get that little bit of an inkling when she tells Kassad to follow her. And then we get this interesting imagery of a tree, Shrike tree, Tesla tree, I'm not quite sure, having impaled multiple not only ousters, but people that he later recognizes as part of the group. Very interesting stuff in terms of the plot. Then we get to where we meet the Shrike, and we get more of a description from Kassad about the Shrike. More so very similar to what Father Duray said previously in the previous story. Very interesting stuff, very interesting, very cool to learn about more what the Shrike can do. And this is where it gets crazy. They eventually happen upon an ouster settlement that has come down from the sky in order to look for Kassad and the ship that was landed. And we get revealed this one fact by Moneta, that the Shrike is able to control time. He's able to slow down time to such a point to where people who are looking at him think that he pops in and out of existence. Now, I was thinking previously in the previous story that it was due to some type of teleportation or some type of just super speed. But no, it is a bit of the speed thing, but not because of its insane physical ability, because of its supernatural-like ability. It's able to slow down time. And not only does it slow down time for itself, it slows down time for Kassad and Moneta. And so we get a big fight sequence where I was honestly kind of grossed out by pretty much everything that Kassad was doing. Being so bloodlusted, being so horny due to fighting people. It was honestly a very weird part of the book that I kind of think that Dan Simmons self-inserted. Kind of a weird thing to talk about throughout the book. But anyways, so they defeat all of the people, all of the ousters in the settlement, and then they get to a specific part. This is where the grossest part of the story happens and where the best line happens. Kassad and Moneta start having sex on top of the dead corpses of the ousters, which is very fucking disgusting. But then Kassad realizes, slowly as they're having intercourse, that Moneta is turning more and more Shrike-like. Starts having metal barbs. Starts having the ruby red eyes. And starts to basically try to kill Kassad throughout their intercourse. And then we get to the nastiest line that's honestly really gross, and it's the best line in my opinion. It's the one that made me react the most, but man, was it fucking gross. So here it is. Where is it? It's actually two lines here. I might just say the whole paragraph. This whole paragraph is disgusting, but well written, but really gross, and I just didn't really like it, and it honestly turned me off from this part of the book. I'll start reading now. Kassad screams and pulls away. Strips of his flesh rip away as he lunges up and sideways. Metal teeth click shut in a steel vagina, missing his glands by a moist millimeter. Kassad slumps on his side, rolls away, hips moving, unable to stop his ejaculation. Semen explodes in streams, falls on the curled fist of a corpse. Kassad moans again, rolls again, curls in a fetal position, even as he comes again and again. Well written, but Jesus, Dan Simmons, like, why are you writing that stuff? That was honestly really freaking gross to write. It really turned me off from that part of the book. Though everything else does supersede it, it is very interesting what is happening, and learning more about the Shrike and it being able to slow down time is very interesting. And also learning that the Shrike might be Moneta, or Moneta might be the Shrike, some sort of connection between them. And the most interesting thing from that segment is that the Shrike tree, the tree of shards that he saw earlier during his visit with Moneta, is poking through some of his companions. He doesn't say which, but he knows that someone is going to be impaled by these spikes. And also he knows that the Shrike wants his help in some sort of way. Very interesting stuff besides that one gross ass paragraph. Very interesting stuff, and I'm really looking forward to what part 3 is going to be. I wonder who's going to be next in the story. Super interesting, but man, was that gross. And I also liked the extended world building that the Ousters had. I'm really interested in that part of the story. Anyways, guys, that is part 2 of my Hyperion review. I will talk to you guys after I read part 3 of Hyperion. Have a good one. Please comment, please subscribe, all the good stuff. And I'll see you guys later.